Hello, welcome to our College Savings Mythbusters webinar. We're so glad that you can join us this afternoon. Before we start, we just want to make sure if you have any audio issues to check your devices settings. Your sound will be disabled, but hopefully you can hear us. If you have any questions, we have the chat enabled for today's webinar, so feel free to pop any questions or feedback into the chat box and we will answer your question either live or have one of our team members get back to you. And go ahead and follow us also on social media platforms at Teach Banzai to learn more about these types of events in the future. I'm Natalie Hollingshead, and I am a curriculum writer here at Banzai. This is Malori Bigler. She's our curriculum lead. And we are talking today about the cost of college and the myths around it. So the cost of college is rising. This is probably no surprise. College tuition and fees have increased significantly faster than inflation. And the burden of student loan debt has reached record-breaking levels, which impacts millions of young adults. So today we thought we'd go over some common myths that a lot of future college goers / teenagers have about the costs of college so that we can help you, give you tools and information to discuss these with your students. So the four myths are myth number one, financial aid will cover most of the cost. Myth number two, student loans are the only way to bridge the gap. Myth number three, you must be a perfect student to qualify for scholarships. And myth number four, your dream school is always the best option.
All right, so I'm going to be tackling myth number one, and this is talking about how financial aid will cover most of the cost. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, 85% of students require financial aid to attend post-secondary school. This financial aid is, the things that we all know, grants, scholarships, loans, all that different type of stuff. But even with these, many students struggle to afford school. And this is because financial aid is often calculated by what the school thinks the student needs and may not accurately represent their actual situation or the things that we need or that they actually need in order to attend school. So these stats come from the U.S. Department of Education's 2019-2020 National Post-Secondary Student Aid Study. And it kind of underscores what we're talking about here. 90% of students who receive Pell Grant money still face unmet need in their financial aid, and 56% of students who do not qualify for federal grant money face an unmet need as well. So all of those that are getting, not all, a vast majority of those that are getting financial aid are still not getting enough to cover their full cost of college. And even those who aren't still have a lot of unmet need. So along with this, there have also been, as everyone knows, a lot of changes going on with how we talk about college and how financial aid is applied to students. The FAFSA was simplified. It was supposed to make it easier to fill out and understand. I think in a lot of ways it did that. In a lot of ways it also complicated things for a lot of students, maybe made some things more confusing or more difficult. The direct transfer was introduced, which was supposed to bring over their parents' information directly into the FAFSA, which I think actually was pretty successful and great. Increased eligibility, students may qualify for grants and loans that didn't before. There were changes to Parent Plus loans. This might affect the interest rates that they'll pay, the eligibility and repayment options, things like that. And then there were also a lot of just state-specific changes that went down this year and that will impact what students are able to get and also what they have to pay. So the first thing that we have to recommend to kind of go over this and that can help students with this is our paying for college game module. What students will do is they can either take the full cost that they estimated in the cost of college module, which allows them to go through and estimate all of their costs for the schools of their choice, or they can just take an estimated cost based on national averages for that school. And then they'll go through and it'll help them break down how they want to pay for that cost. So it'll go over financial aid, you can expect that you'll probably get around this much in financial aid, and this is how much that'll cover. It'll go over the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized loans, scholarships, saving plans, all these different things to help you okay, yes, maybe financial aid isn't going to cover the whole thing for you. Here's how we can make up the rest of that cost. We also have a bunch of other awesome things that talk about paying for college. We have articles that go over applying for the FAFSA. We have a coach that goes over applying for the FAFSA. Yeah, a bunch of stuff in there that can be really helpful for that. So we kind of want to get your guys' thoughts and opinions, talk to each other. You guys have experience on the front lines. What do your students struggle to understand about financial aid? What is the biggest thing that is confusing. And while we wait for some of those answers to come in, you can go ahead and just fill them in the chat box. We were going to talk a little bit about what we found confusing, or what we have found most students to find confusing.
Yeah, I know when I was a student, and that was admittedly a while ago, I had roommates who just thought that you should take out whatever the maximum amount of financial aid is that you should qualify for. And we'll talk about a little bit about why that's maybe not the best idea in the next myth, but I think they didn't understand just really like how that worked and what the components of financial aid were.
Yeah.
And also I have my oldest is a senior this year, and he's talking about going to schools. I think he thinks that he can just kind of request a certain amount of money, and as long as he's willing to take on the debt,
yeah,
he's entitled to, whatever he needs in his mind to attend college, and that's not really how it works.
Yeah. Well, and I think what also can be potentially dangerous for students is things like student loans, which we'll get more into later. The ability to take them out is like right there. You're like going through your school application and it's like, take out $2,000 in loans. And you're like, okay, why not? Like, it makes this thing that actually is a big deal feel like maybe not as much of a big deal. So that can be kind of intimidating.
For sure. And if we don't have any questions, we can just move on. But if you think of something as we're discussing, then go ahead and put it in the chat. So the next myth is that student loans are the only way to bridge the gap. So millions of students take on student loans every year, and it's sort of the de facto payment for post-secondary education. Because let's be honest, not a lot of students have a ton of money set aside either by them or a guardian or a loved one to pay for their post-secondary education. And they can be a really great tool, right? But they should still be considered with a lot of thought and a lot of intentionality, and not just as sort of like the de facto way to like bridge that gap. So if students don't qualify for a lot of government-based student loans, then they'll have to take out private student loans that have higher interest rates. They're less flexible. They have more difficult payment plans. So we just need to make students aware of what that looked like, right? So here's some hard truths about student loans. So student loans add to your debt burden. They can take years to pay off. Student loans have specific repayment plans, and they're not one size fits all. Not everyone will qualify, for instance, for a repayment plan that includes loan forgiveness. And to that end, things can change suddenly. There's no guarantee that programs with loan forgiveness will pop up in the future. They were certainly never a reality when I was a student, and it's not something that we can be really planning on. You sometimes run into students that think like, I'll just take out whatever I want because at some point these are going to be forgiven. And that's really not how it works out. Default, failing to repay on student loans can lead to default and really damage your credit in the long run. Impact on your future goals. Having debt limits your financial flexibility. I have two neighbors who both have, one partner has a PhD, the other one has a master's degree. One's a professor, the other one's a teacher. They're in their 50s and they are still paying on student loans.
Yikes.
Now that they have one of their own children in college. So, you have to think kind of longer out on that.
Yeah.
And then interest rates is another thing that students don't really consider. Interest rates on student loans are often higher than other loan types, and interest rates on private loans are higher. So one resource that can help students maybe understand this a little bit better is our student loan calculator. And just as FYI, we'll send a follow-up email out tomorrow with a link to the professional development survey to get your professional development certificate that we'll mention at the end of this webinar, but also we'll send out an email with these resources that we mentioned so that you don't have to go, finding them, search for them on our website.
Yeah.
Right to you. But the student loan calculator, you can have students play through the cost of college and then take that number and whatever they think they're going to need as a student loan, put this in their student loan calculator. They can adjust the loan term, the interest rate, even an added monthly payment amount, and they can see, how much interest they'll save by paying it on, fast or slow, how much interest they will pay, and then how long it will take for them to pay off. And this sort of activity can really help students understand what they're getting into, right? Because student loans aren't bad. They're just a tool, and we need to understand how that tool works. In fact, there are some benefits to student loans, right? Like it can make a student going to college more accessible, like we said, for people who don't have a money tree in their backyard. It can really, investing in education can lead to better careers, better job opportunities that make the student loan make sense in the long run, right? Flexibility, there are repayment options. You usually don't have to repay while you're still in school, and there are, a few other exceptions that can make it a valuable tool for students. They're government backed, which can, a lot of student loans are government backed, and that can provide certain protections. And then, there is the potential for forgiveness, but I'd make sure that if you mention that to students, just to be very clear about that being potential and not some sort of guarantee, and something that can change quite quickly. So any questions on student loans, or do you have any feedback on, do your students understand the good and the bad about student loans? Do you find that they generally look favorably on student loans and talk about it like it's a tool that will be useful for them? Or are they nervous about student loans? I'd be curious to know what they're thinking.
Yeah, well, and I think like you said, what's most important is to recognize that like this is a tool that you can use, and it can be really helpful to make something that was inaccessible accessible and actually possible for you. But also it's not just a button that you click and you get free money and you don't have to worry about it anymore. Like it's real money that you're taking out that's going to have real consequences on you for the rest of your life. And what does that mean? And do you understand what that's going to mean? And do you have a plan for it? Or are you just doing it because it's a default? So yeah, it's kind of a stressful topic. It can be a stressful topic for some students, but it's really important for them to understand as they go into taking on this big financial commitment. For a lot of them, probably the first big financial commitment that they've ever had. So
yeah. Absolutely. Okay, let's move on to myth number 3.
Okay, cool. I'm going to talk about this one. So if students aren't fulfilling that, or if financial aid isn't filling that whole gap for students and they need ways to pay for school, and loans sometimes can be good, sometimes can be damaging, how are they supposed to get it? Scholarships is probably the number one way that we recommend, because this is much more of what they want. It's free money, it's stuff like that. But a lot of students may feel like, well, I'm not going to be able to qualify for it. So like, why would I even try? It's important for students to recognize you don't have to be a perfect student in order to qualify for scholarships. It's estimated that close to $100 million in scholarships go unclaimed each year, and $2 billion in student grants go unclaimed, all due to lack of applicants. So there's money that's available that's just being left on the table because nobody's applying for it. And we want your students to get it. You want your students to get it. There are a few things, let's see, there are some misconceptions that I want to go over that are surrounding this. So a lot of students will think like, well, I'm not a perfect student. I don't have a 4.0. I didn't do all these extra classes or whatever. I can't possibly qualify for it. And while it's true that there are a lot of scholarships that are designated for those types of students, there are also a bunch of other ones that will apply to their specific niche interest or their specific situation or anything like that. Another myth or a misunderstanding that's out there about scholarships is just limited availability, and that there aren't that many, which again, I kind of already talked about. There are thousands of scholarships available. They just need to do the looking for them and find them. Most scholarships are awarded annually, meaning you can continue receiving that payment, or you can find new scholarships and apply for them again. So it's not just like well, I didn't get it, now I'm in trouble and I'm never going to get it. Like, keep going, keep applying. You can apply for them throughout your college experience, and it keep working. And then also, students need to understand what a scholarship is, that it isn't a loan and it isn't money that they're going to have to give back after they take it. This is money that is given to you with oftentimes no strings. Sometimes a scholarship, for example, if you take out a scholarship from your school, it may require you to keep a certain GPA or take a certain amount of credits or things like that. So make sure you understand what you're agreeing to when you take out a scholarship, but almost never will you have to repay that scholarship. And then, scholarships can cover a lot of the cost of schools. Oftentimes the big scholarships that we hear about are the ones that are full ride scholarships, or are like, oh my gosh, they got a $100,000 scholarship or whatever. And those are great. Those are fantastic. But what can be more helpful for students often, because those ones are so competitive, is to apply to a lot of smaller scholarships. Those are going to be much less competitive, much easier to get, and they can build up to really equal a lot. So kind of pointing you guys toward what can be helpful for this for your students is our scholarships module. So this one's really exciting because it helps students prepare for an actual scholarship application. So what we'll do is we go through in the game like, okay, here are some things that you should be aware of when you're looking for scholarships. Here are some things that may signify that it's actually a scam and not going to be all that helpful, because unfortunately scholarship scams exist. We want to make sure none of your students fall for that. And then once they've kind of got these ideas in mind, they'll go through and start looking at recommendations of scholarships for them. Like, okay, maybe I'm not going to get an academic-based scholarship, but I could potentially get an artistic-based one, or a first-time student, or a first-generation student one, or an athletic one, or all of these options. It helps recommend different things that they could do for that. And then finally, we take them through the process of looking for an actual scholarship, which is really awesome. They go through, they find one that they feel like is going to apply for them and be a good fit for them. And then we take them through preparing the application via an essay. Oftentimes that can be really intimidating for students, or really like, oh man, I don't want to write an essay. Like, I already do that for school. Why would I do it for this thing that I don't even know if I'm going to get anything out of it? So the goal of this module is to make that really easy for them and just be like, nope, we're going to walk you through exactly what you need to do. You'll make your thesis statement with us. You'll make your supporting arguments. And when they finish this module, they'll walk away with a really awesome outline that will just take them a little bit longer to actually like finish it up and submit the scholarship. Again, we want to make it as easy as possible for your students to get these scholarships. And this is a really great way to help facilitate that. Within the module, it also gives a bunch of tips for finding scholarships and for ensuring that the scholarship that you find is actually going to be helpful, and also in working on your application. But these are some other ones that you could share with your students. Some of them are touched on in the module, some of them aren't, but just some things to consider as you kind of begin talking about this with your students. Start early. A lot of scholarship applications will be opening at the beginning of the school year or midway through the school year. They don't have to actually wait until like the end when they're looking to pay for scholarship or looking to pay for college. It's best to start now and start applying as often as you can and kind of spread it out throughout the whole year. Utilize online resources. There are so many big scholarship search engines out there, like take advantage of them. FastWeb, scholarships.com, College Board, and there are a bunch of other ones that all offer like really awesome comprehensive databases for finding scholarships. Also check with your local school and community. Like I said, those really big scholarships are the ones that are kind of get a lot of clout and get a lot of excitement and noise around them. But those also tend to have the most competition. If you go for a smaller scholarship that's like specific to your school or your community or a club that you're in or anything like that, like that's going to be much less competitive and much easier to get. Again, that kind of goes into the more niche you can get it, the better. So encourage your students to look for like niche areas that are interesting to them. If they love, everyone knows about the duct tape prom dress one. If they want to do the duct tape prom dress, great, do that. But if they have an interest in, I don't know, crocheting or filmmaking or whatever, I can guarantee there are scholarships related to those things. So encourage them to look into that and find things that sound exciting and fun to them. Encourage them while they're going through and filling it out that they are reading carefully, that they're being thorough. You wouldn't want them to accidentally not qualify for the scholarship because they didn't realize that their essay couldn't be past this length or whatever. So yeah, just really encourage them to pay attention to the details as they're going and to not be afraid to ask for help. Most schools often have a dedicated counselor that can help with this, or a scholarship expert, or you as their teacher can, encourage them to ask for help from you, their parents, anything like that. Again, it's often scary to kind of make this big transition into talking about big money and big life changes. So anything that you can do to help make that transition less scary, encourage them to ask for help, that's all fantastic. They're never too young to start networking and start using their connections and find, their local financial institution, if that offers a scholarship, or if someone in their community is willing to, help contribute to their education. There's a lot of opportunities around them that you should encourage them to look into. And finally, to be patient. just kind of the name of the game with scholarships. You apply for a lot and you only get a little, but that little makes a huge difference. And so just to help set up students' mindset to be in the right place as they're doing that and recognize that like, okay, I'm probably not going to, actually, I'm almost certainly not going to get all of the ones that I apply for, and that's okay. That's not the expectation for this situation. The expectation is that I'm going to apply for a ton and then get a few of them. Yeah, it can be a little bit disheartening if that's what you're going into it expecting. So just helping them to set that expectation and whatnot. We have a really exciting announcement after this that is related to these things. And that is that we have started our own Banzai scholarship. We're super, super excited about this. This has been in the works for a little while and it is finally out there and released to the public. This is the Banzai Life Literacy Scholarship. It's going to be fantastic. So here's a little bit more of the details. Essentially, in order to apply, students must play through at least 2 Banzai games, and they'll submit their username and their teacher's name for proof as they go through that. They also need to submit an original essay of 350 to 500 words on why financial literacy is important to them or how they're going to use what they've learned in the future. And then that's basically it. It's very easy. We're going to be giving out 5 awards of $2,000 each, and it's open to, well, I'll get into who it's open for in a second. But that deadline is March 31st, 2025. So they've got a long time to prepare for this and get all of those things done and ready. So here's some more information about who is eligible for this scholarship. It's eligible for high school juniors and seniors who meet the following things. They must be residents of the United States. They must be at least 16 years old. Again, they must have played through at least 2 Banzai games and submit proof. And then they also must plan on enrolling in some kind of post-secondary education. So that can be a college, a university, trade, vocational, technical school, whatever. We're very, we encourage students to just get some kind of post-secondary training or experience. So they must plan on doing one of those by the 2029-2030 school year for this year's scholarship. And we chose to kind of extend that a little bit because a lot of students choose to take a gap year or whatever it is. So we wanted to make sure that this would be open and apply to as many students as possible. In the email that we are going to send out, we'll send out more information about where to find the application for that and everything like that. But yeah, Banzai Life Literacy Scholarship. We are super, super excited about it. It has been in the work, like I said, for a long time. And we hope that tons and tons of students apply because again, our goal is to help as many students as possible feel financially safe and understandable and sound, and that they're able to, do what they want and make those things possible. So with that in mind, oop, I skipped it. And this, can just be something that you're considering as you plan your lessons plans, or we can kind of chat about it here. But what have you found is the most intimidating part of the scholarship process for your students, and what could we do to help, or what could you do as a teacher to help alleviate that? I don't know. Do you have any thoughts?
I just think getting started is like intimidating, right? Like you
Yeah.
think it's going to be a lot of work, and it really can be, but it could also be something that they sort of do incrementally, like maybe have a day of the week, or when after their homework, or maybe they don't have a lot of homework, they can sit down and just start. I think just putting themselves out there can be tricky, and it is hard for students to maybe identify their strengths and weaknesses and whatnot. But I think having a discussion with them about what scholarships would be a good fit, and then just encouraging them to just try.
Yeah.
And they'll refine their kind of what they're targeting for over time, right? But if you don't start, you just never know, right?
Totally. Well, and I think it kind of goes back to what I was talking about, that like scholarships is kind of a weird situation in that you kind of go into it expecting that you're going to get a lot of rejection, and that's like scary and hard and not the most fun. So I think it's just helping prepare students for that and understanding that like, yeah, you can submit to a bunch of things. You probably aren't going to get all of them, and like, that's okay. That is a part of the situation, but that shouldn't scare you off from applying, because you never know, you could get it. And like, any amount is helpful, whether that amount is $100 or $5,000, that is going to make a difference in your life, in your school. And if it takes you an hour to apply and you get $100 out of it, like that is great pay.
That's a pretty
$100
good
an hour.
return on investment, right?
Yeah.
And there's a question in the chat that would my student be eligible for the scholarship because their school does not currently have a personal finance class? And the answer is yes. We don't require any students that are applying for this scholarship to be enrolled in a personal finance class. They just have to play through 2 Banzai games and modules.
Yeah.
So to play through the modules, they
Yeah.
do need to be tied to a teacher account.
Yeah.
But that could be their school counselor could
Mhm.
create a class for students at the school to apply. That could be a social studies teacher, a math teacher, you know, there's all different ways.
Yeah.
So they do need to be connected to a class, but it doesn't have to be a personal finance class. So, you know, something you might want to do is as you share this with your teacher friends, see if there's someone on your faculty, if you don't have a personal finance class, that wants to head this up and get interested students could form their own class with a teacher
Mhm.
and have that class exist just for the purpose of playing through these games.
Yeah.
We're great with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's another question. Could my daughter be linked to my class even though they aren't a student of mine? Yeah, I think that's fine as long as they play through the games and meet the, you know, the qualifications, like have to be 16 and reside in the US. That's completely fine. If you are comfortable with that, we are too.
Cool.
And
Okay.
if you have any other questions about the scholarship, just go ahead and throw them in the chat.
And we will be sending out a bunch more emails and information about that as well. This was just kind of our first big hurrah announcement of it.
Yeah, it seemed like a good time to announce it. So we've got one fourth and final myth here to debunk, and that is that your dream school is always the best option. And often this can be the hardest thing to get across to our students, right? As I said, I have a child who's a senior, and it's you know, you want to support them in their dream of going for the big school, but that actually at the end of the day might not serve them best. So that's not what they're going to maybe hear on TikTok, but it could be, honestly, choosing a dream school could end up being not to overstate, a mistake that will kind of follow them for a very long time because the financial stress really does take a toll. So the idea is that college is a stepping stone, right? And it's a stepping stone in the direction of their career and their future. So when they're looking at a college, it shouldn't just be they've always wanted to go to X school because, you know, they heard about it on Gilmore Girls. They need to, you know, actually figure out what college is going to be best for them. So a few things to keep in mind: financial constraints, right? The cost of attending a dream college can be completely prohibitive, especially if they don't have financial aid, or to take the Gilmore Girls a step further, they don't have a rich grandma. Okay, academic fit. Sometimes the dream college actually doesn't have the programs that the student is really interested in or really interested in pursuing. And a dream school is probably not where you want to go to get your generals done, right? Lots of times these dream schools are really pie in the sky, and maybe it'd be beneficial to the student to go to a junior college or local college with in-state tuition first, and then transfer for the remaining years to that bigger name school with they want on their diploma.
Just make sure if students are planning on doing that, that they think about it really carefully and that they do their research to make sure that their credits transfer.
Yes,
because they wouldn't want to take a bunch of classes, spend a bunch of money, and then move to their new school and have it not
that would be really bad. Yeah. Location of the school, you know, what ends up happening, especially for a lot of people that go out of state. I know for myself, I moved somewhere to go to school and then I never left, because that's where you get your job connections, right? You get your internships, you get your opportunities, and then you really build your career and your life in that location. So encourage your students to think about the location of the school as well, and not just like proximity to the beach or like a cool downtown scene. But, you know, is that some place that they could see themselves actually living? Because chances are they might end up building a life there. Student life. So the campus culture, social scene, and extracurricular activities might not be a good fit for you. You know, if you have a child or a student who really enjoys having one-on-one conversations, for instance, with their high school teachers, and really values those relationships, they might not want to go to a school that has really, really big 900 student starter general level classes, right? Where they won't maybe stand out, or they'll have to work really hard, and they won't have that one-on-one time unless they chase down office hours, which can be notoriously hard to do, right? And then academic rigor. A dream college might be more than they're really comfortable with. And again, it might be a better idea to start out somewhere else. Okay, and I see that Nicole's answering a question in the chat about, what about homeschooled students? Yes, so homeschool students can apply, but their parent or guide will need to create a teacher account, invite the student, and then just go through that process. But as a homeschooler, you absolutely can set up a Banzai teacher account for your students. That's great. So along with this dream school myth, you don't want to just pop the balloon and say, your dream school is not a good idea. I think it's, better idea to maybe try to guide students into making realistic decisions. So helping them assess their priorities and goals, looking down the road. What are their academic interests and career aspirations? What kind of learning environment do you prefer? Do you want large or small classes? Do you want an urban or a rural setting? What is your budget? And are there specific majors or programs you're interested in? Researching alternatives. So use a college search website like US News and World Report, College Board to compare schools and see, how do these schools stand out? You can visit college campuses to get a feel for the atmosphere and talk to current students. That can be really cost prohibitive for a lot of students. So you can do, a lot of colleges now offer virtual tours. So they can take a virtual school of campus and then maybe narrow it down to one or two that, if the budget allows, that they can go visit. Looking into the academic reputation, location, the value for the dollar. There's a million rankings out there, and they can kind of hone in on the one that's maybe most beneficial or speaks most to them. So thinking about their academic fit, right? Like, do they want something where they're really gonna have to stretch academically, or something where they maybe feel like they're kind of coming in on top of things, right? Or do they want something with a lot of extracurricular activities, sororities, that sort of thing? Or are they really only there to study? It's really important for students to consider all those elements, and not just sort of base what they think they want of college off of a movie.
Or a name,
or yes, or a reputation or whatnot. And then don't be afraid to ask questions. So they can reach out to the admissions counselors, current students, alumni to get perspectives and see what sort of support services the college has. Do they have internship placement programs? Do they have career counseling? What sort of services do they offer for students, to just get a really comprehensive idea of what's available? And then trusting their gut, right? At the end of the day, you can have all the data in the world that could point in one direction, and a student might feel really strongly about doing something else. That could be because it's a learning opportunity, and that could be because it truly is the right fit for them, right? So, try to help students make choices that align with their values and their needs, and then, teach them to trust themselves. So one game that we have that's really beneficial for this is the cost of college. And this covers things like, it goes through the real data, cost of attendance or COA at over 8,000 universities, colleges, and trade schools in like an interactive storyline. And so the topics that are covered are tuition and fees, housing and utilities, food, transportation, and entertainment, right? Often a student may say, oh, I think I can get a full ride, and maybe they can, but the tuition sometimes is not even the biggest part of the bill, right? There's books. I remember dropping classes in college because the books were too expensive and I was paying for them myself, and I dropped a class to take a cheaper one until I could stomach paying $600. I'm sure it's more. Like I said, that was a while ago.
Yeah.
For books. And housing and utilities can be astronomical, especially in some more urban settings.
Yeah.
Food, are they going to do a meal plan? Are they going to have a cup of noodles every day? Are they going to make their own food from scratch? There's a lot of different factors there. Transportation. I didn't have a car in college. I walked everywhere, but depending on where they're going, that might not be realistic, depending on how the campus is organized, right? If it's spread out, if it's concentrated, maybe they can bike, maybe they can't bike because it's winter for 5 months of the year, right? Like, there are a lot of different things to consider. So yeah.
Sorry, I was gonna jump
go
in.
ahead.
And one thing that's really cool about this game is it like takes these things that are theoretical and they're like, oh yeah, well, I'll figure it out when I get there or whatever. And it kind of forces them to like actually make a plan and like actually consider like, oh, okay, yeah, if I went to the school, where would I live? And like, oh, well, if I lived there, that would be really expensive. So I probably would have to live somewhere else. Or like, how am I going to get to school? How am I going to do all these things? Which can be really helpful because again, it takes this thing that is just like an idea, like, oh yeah, I'm going to go to college, and it helps them be like, nope, here is like my actual plan for what I'm going to do and what that will mean.
Yeah, and just going into it with eyes wide open, right?
Yes.
Like, we don't want people to stumble backwards into these decisions. We want students to be empowered to make decisions that are going to serve them, and know if they're getting into student debt, if they're making a big move across the country, doing all these things, that they feel empowered. Because let's face it, the first like week or two of college life is really overwhelming, and you can be tempted to like just run the other direction. And I think that happens for a lot of people. And so the more grounded they can feel in their decision, the better like that will serve them in the future, right? So then another game we have that we wanted to call attention to is college alternatives. College is not a good choice or fit for lots of students. There are a lot of really great ways to build a career that don't have to require a college degree. So we have this game, College Alternatives, helps students research alternative college options while role-playing as a journalist. So it covers post-high school options like going straight into the workforce, going to trade school, starting your own business as an entrepreneur, doing an apprenticeship, or going to a tech boot camp, just as some options, and kind of helps not only students research these specific options, but gives them the tools and questions they would need to investigate any post-secondary option in this manner. Talks also about soft skills, time and money management, and kind of teaches them how to resource. So that's a really popular option. So let's chat. If you have any thoughts to share on this, how do you guide students in making realistic college decisions? And I was going to share a quick story on this when it talks about the dream school. I have someone I know who got into a very prestigious law school, got in multiple six-figure debt to go to this law school, and then at the end of the day, ultimately on the East Coast, ultimately wanted to return home closer to live, closer to their like rural upbringing, basically. So still an attorney, but instead of working at a big East Coast law firm that would sort of have a paycheck that would match this multiple six-figure debt, is working, still locally as an attorney, and still making good money. But he sort of realized that he basically overeducated himself, and that there was perfectly good law school options a lot closer to home, where he could have been closer to family, had way like none to like hardly any debt to almost no debt.
Yeah.
And didn't really realize, just kind of followed this narrative of, I'm going to go to the very best school I can get into, and really wishes someone at that point would have said, that's great, and like a feather in your cap that you got into that school, but is that actually the best choice for the career that you want in the future, right? And
Totally.
it is really easy to get distracted by those big names, and maybe make a decision that doesn't serve us down the road.
Yeah. Again, I'm just thinking a lot about what Natalie said earlier. We want to help students feel prepared for whatever decision they make, and to understand the consequences of those decisions, and be educated as they make them, and know that, okay, if I do decide to go to this big school, probably going to have to take out loans, probably going to have to do all this. What is that going to mean for my future? Things like that. Yeah, because it's really important for students to understand what they're getting into. And that's what we hope that we can help you guys as teachers empower your students to do, as they are making these big, exciting, but also scary, important decisions.
Yeah. And we don't want to scare anyone.
Yeah.
But absolutely, it's just good to be grounded in reality. Like, if a student wants to go into something really creative, I think that's awesome, but maybe know that the very best way to keep your creative career options open is to minimize your school debt, so that when you graduate, you don't have to just take whatever the first job is that comes your way, and you have time to find that creative niche, right?
Yeah.
So, is your school going to be expanding your options, or is it going to be kind of limiting them, right? And that's not one size fits all as well. So if you have any other questions about college and career content from Banzai, you can drop it in the chat. Also, feel free to email us at any time. We'll show this in a screen in just a minute, but I'm Natalie@banzai.org. This is Mallory with an I and no E at banzai.org. And we are so happy to hear your ideas, give feedback, recommend resources, anything like that. We are here to help you. If you are someone who needs to sign up for a teacher account, like we've discussed, maybe for the scholarships, to try for our life literacy
Yeah,
scholarship.
and just get some more information about like what else Banzai
Yes.
does and everything.
Yeah, then these QR codes, you can take a screenshot of this. The one on the left is the Banzai Basics PD session that will sort of walk you through, not sort of, it will walk you through signing up for a teacher account, kind of getting the lay of the land in our teacher account and the grading interface and how to add students and those sorts of basics. And then you can also just sign up for a free demo directly with our teacher support specialist, a one-on-one demo where they'll walk you through exactly how to do it yourself.
Yeah, they'll answer all your questions.
Yeah.
They're fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. And for watching this webinar, for joining us, again, thank you so much. We will send you a certificate for a free PD credit. If you're watching live right now, check your email in the next 24 to 48 hours for the survey link, and we'll also include links to all the other resources that we mentioned today. If you're watching on demand on our professional development website, check the survey link in the video description for that link to fill out, and then you'll get your professional development certificate.
Yeah, we had someone ask if this recording will be available. Yes, we have our PD website where everything lives. I don't know what the URL is. Banzai.org/PD, perhaps. I will find out.
We will send that in the email as well.
Yeah, or we'll send it in the chat. But yeah, everything will be available online. Probably within about a week of this live webinar, so you can go back and review it whenever.
Yeah, absolutely will be available for sure. And then here's our information if you want to connect with us either on LinkedIn or shoot us an email with an idea for a future webinar, idea for a resource that you would love to see Banzai create for your students. If you want to give feedback on how you're using Banzai in the classroom, we would love to hear it all.
I have that link now. It's banzai.org/teacher-professional-development.
Yes, perfect. And thank you so much for joining us, and we really appreciate your time. Have a great day.
Thank you.